Greetings and welcome to the Richard Dolan Show, where every week we fight the good fight. I'm very excited about this week's program. I have a fascinating guest that I am sure you have not heard of, but you will know who he is when we're done, that's for sure. This is Allan Lavigne. We're going to be talking about his experience in the field of UFO research. Allan goes back to the organization known as APRO back in the 1970s, when APRO was easily the world's best UFO investigative organization. And this is a man who was the first person to interview Travis Walton while Travis was still in the hospital, interviewed a fascinating case of Charles Moody, which if you don't know about it, you will. It's an amazing case. A case of William Herman. He was one of the first people to talk to Jesse Marcel Sr. regarding Roswell, and was also involved in talking to Betty Andreasson and Ray Fowler for that amazing case, all in the 1970s, and with much, much more information. This is fascinating. But Allan, beyond the UFO field, has 30 plus years of experience in security, law enforcement, emergency services. He is an expert in the fields of physical security, life safety, criminal investigation, counterterrorism, counter-surveillance detection. He's worked with the FBI, not for them. He's assisted the FBI, also Department of Homeland Security. He designed, on short notice, from what I remember him telling me, a soft ballistic armor. This is back in 2005 for use of Humvees in the Iraq theater of war, and did that quite successfully. The man has been around. He's even got more than that, but we're going to be talking UFOs. Allan, welcome to the program. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to be on with you today.
It is, really, well, thank you. It is my pleasure and my honor to have you as a guest. People should know we've spoken privately on the phone quite a bit at this point, so I have a pretty good handle on your story, but there's a lot of details that I still do not know. We're going to get into it, and I just want people to understand what we have here. In terms of content, this is multiple episodes, multiple shows that we're going to have to be doing. I mean, I could just do a 4-hour single interview with you, but I think that would probably be overwhelming. So I think we're going to break this down. One thing that I didn't mention in the intro is that you yourself had 2 really remarkable, I would say extraordinary UFO encounters yourself back in the 1970s. The second one of those just kind of blew my mind, but both of them were fascinating. I think we're going to want to spend a separate interview on that. Apparently, the initiative that the Jimmy Carter White House had with APRO in the late 70s, I don't know if anyone knows about this, and we're going to be talking about that. And actually, I want to have you discuss the generalities of the UFO and ET phenomenon, because I think you have a lot to say about that. In our private conversation, I thought you were really on point with a lot of the elements of that. So that's a whole other conversation. We have a lot to talk about, but I was hoping that we could start by just dipping our toes into the water into your time with APRO, the anomalous phenomena research organization run by James and Coral Lorenzen, and how you got into that without getting into your UFO sighting that got you there, because we'll save that.
Yeah, let me go back to the beginning, because a lot of people are not at all familiar with APRO. It was founded in 1952 by Coral and Jim out of Wisconsin, Sturgeon, Wisconsin. Coral, who is like the communications lead person, the face of APRO, the public face of APRO, she was, for a short time, a reporter for the Green Bay Gazette. And also during the war, she worked in the defense industry. She was actually a machinist in the defense.
During World War II, I guess.
Yeah, in World War II, yeah. And she had at least 3 sightings herself. First one when she was 9. That was a multiple witness sighting. She was with 2 friends. It was also seen by other people in the area. This was a scallop-shaped, glowing white UFO. She reported it to her parents. Her parents reported it to the police department, and so there were other people that saw it as well in the area. Then she had another sighting in 47 in Arizona. I don't know the details of that, but then she had another one in Door Peninsula, Wisconsin, which was witnessed by 300 people. So she had seen this, but her and Jim founded APRO in 1952 after the Washington wave of UFOs. And though they began in 52 in Wisconsin, in 1954, late in 54 would have been the spring or summer of that year, they moved briefly to Los Angeles. And then, and this is what people don't, it's out there, but people just seem to miss it. They both went to Holloman Air Force Base. Coral was the mission project reporter out of the range officers headquarters there. And Jim was, he's an electronic engineer. Wendell Stevens, who was his best friend and someone I worked with very closely during the time, they met while he was at Holloman. And Wendell told me at the time, this was in 74, that both Jim and him were Blue Beret. Now, I didn't know what that meant at the time. Today, it's associated with UFO recoveries and stuff. And of course, Holloman Air Force Base is renowned for its association with UFOs. In 1954, when Jim and Coral began there, that was the year that it's rumored that President Eisenhower was spirited away to Holloman on a UFO-related incident.
Yeah, right. People should remember, I mean, it's not just the Edwards Air Force Base incident, which I think a lot of people know about, but yes, also Holloman allegedly in 1954.
Yeah. And so they from 1954 to 1960, and again, people don't realize this, the APRO bulletins and investigations were literally being conducted out of Holloman Air Force Base. I mean, that's where all
they had an office at Holloman, Jim and Coral.
They didn't call it APRO, but that's where they were working at. They were working full time there at Holloman. And that's
did the Air Force, were they aware of this? Did they care? Was this
in reflection, given, if you, even to this day, if you go on and try and do a deep dive into Jim's background, you're not going to find anything, which tells me that Wendell was right, that
they were civilian civilian employees of the Air Force. Is that how this is?
I cannot pin that down, because that's one of the things that I was, I've looked for myself, because going back, I thought, like, well, did they enlist or were they working as civilian contractors? If she was the project missions reporter, she was enlisted. That's not a private, situation.
You're saying Coral Lorenzen might have actually been active duty United States Air Force for a time.
Yes, and I know Jim was, because I saw him in uniform, photos of him in uniform at their house.
Okay, so I don't know how many people knew that. I did not know that.
It's as far as their time there, that's open source. You can find that even today. I just don't think anybody ever, connected it. Go like,
well, what a weird thing. You need to keep talking about this, because you knew them very, very well.
Yeah.
But for people who don't really know much about the Lorenzens, they back in the 50s, like their attitude about the whole UFO subject, they were very critical of the other big group, NICAP, run by Donald Kehoe. And their whole thing was NICAP's wasting their time trying to find the conspiracy and get disclosure. I mean, no one used that word back then, but that was it. And they were more, let's study the phenomenon, let's get into the nuts and bolts and get into it. But the other thing about them, I know you'll probably discuss this, but Coral, I know in particular, had a real distrust of the CIA because she knew that they had been surveilling her organization. So on the one hand, they were obviously patriotic Americans, but they also had a real distrust of the intelligence apparatus.
Yeah, and it could have been, again, in reflection, given my background since then, it could have been intelligence operations, in conflict. It could have been a competitive thing, but no, she was definitely very concerned about the CIA's connection in the field, and yeah, they were definitely surveilled. I can say that. I mean, we had break-ins in the offices.
Yeah, so I want to hear all about this,
Yeah.
and I'm sure listeners do too. So when you had a sighting, and that's what prompted your interest in the UFO thing, and without getting into the details of the sighting, well, do you want to talk? I'm trying to think what's the best
I
way
can
to do
share without getting into the details of the sighting. I can share when after that sighting, back in those days, again, there's no internet or anything like that. I literally, you're looking at a phone book. Oh, they're right near me.
You were a kid. You were a young guy. You're very.
Well, I think it was 19 or so.
Yeah, right.
Back then, today you would think of someone as a kid because you got people in their 30s living at home, but that's not the way. I was totally on my own at that time. I mean, I was working and completely self-sufficient at that time. But they were their office, according to the phone book, was very close to where I was living. Thought, oh, I'm just going to pop over there and take a look at this. My education at the time was in machine engineering and drafting and stuff. I had already compiled 6 years of that, and my family worked at Hughes Aircraft. And my career path, I was thinking at the time, oh, I want to go into aerospace engineering and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, hey, this is interesting. UFOs, aliens. I'm going to stop in there. Maybe there's something I can get involved in this, and I wanted to do what your friend Michael Schratt does so successfully now. It's create models and do, renderings and things like this. And I thought I could do, and that's how I pitched it to Jim, like a police artist kind of thing. But let me just backtrack just a little bit from when they left Holloman to come to Tucson. Now, again, you have to frame this in what was going on nationally and internationally in the country. Holloman had this deep connection with UFOs. In fact, one of the most famous UFO photographs was color photograph was done in 1957, right outside of Holloman. You'd know the photo if you saw it. It's a glowing UFO flying across the horizon.
I'm going to, after we do this interview, I'm going to be dropping some images in, and I know exactly which one you are talking about.
Yeah. And James Fox he corroborated that there were photographs of a landing UFO at Holloman. He had 2 eyewitnesses to that who filmed it. So there was a lot of deep connection there. And like I said, they were working right out of Holloman Air Force Base. And so then in 1960, they came to Tucson. No, so what was Tucson back then? Tucson was literally 3 things. It was Strategic Air Command Davis-Monthan, it was Hughes Aircraft, and it was ringed by Titan ICBM nuclear missiles. It was in the top 5 Cold War targets. It was hot and cold running espionage there. I mean, that was it. If you went around the town, Linda Ronstadt said at the time, I remember, because she was a senior to me when I was in high school. She said,
Linda Ronstadt?
Yeah.
Oh.
She went to Catalina High School, same as me. Actually, in my junior high, she was with the Stone Ponies then, and they were the band for our last. It was a dance, one of the dances there in junior high. But anyway, she called Tucson. She said Tucson's nothing but a string of bowling alleys and drive-in theaters, which was the case back then, except for Davis-Monthan and Hughes Aircraft. Those were the prominent, employers for the entire town. There was really nothing else. Okay. So that's where Jim and Coral end up, and start doing, because it was a hotbed for UFOs back during the 60s. And I've seen some writers say, oh, there was a disaster for APRO at the end of 69 because the Condon report came out and said nothing to see here, and they closed Blue Book. That's not true at all. The 70s were probably their busiest decade for UFO research, and in fact, in 67, we had our highest membership, 1,500 people. 10% of those were outside the country, 150 countries. And by the middle 70s, Coral and Jim had written over 8 books. Jim was very proud that those were translated into 50 languages all over the world. And I know you've shared that you were astonished that we had 800 sightings a month reported to the office.
Yeah, let's just make this clear. Your office was getting up to 800 UFO reports per month.
Yes.
That's actually more on an annual basis than what goes into the National UFO Reporting Center today.
And you have to, and the reason, there's a number of reasons for that.
There's no internet. This is mailbags.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw the bags, and Jim was sitting at the desk going through them. The reason being is Condon Report shut everything down. Blue Book got shut down. NICAP was gone. It would be another year or two before MUFON went rogue and they started their operation. So APRO was the only one. There was nobody else worldwide. When someone goes, and I even hear this today, they'll interview someone who saw something and they'll say, well, did you report it? Well, I didn't know who to report it to. Well, back then, the only one to report it to was APRO. Yeah. So 800 sightings worldwide, and a lot of these were coming from Brazil, from Europe. I don't recall any from Africa. There were a lot from Japan. A lot of stuff came out of Japan. So that was the only place. Now, another thing too, back then in the 60s and 70s, it's not like it is today. When I lived in Arizona, on a moonlit night, I could literally count the trees in the Catalina foothills. The sky was that clear. The last time I was there a couple of years ago, I couldn't even see the mountains at night at all. It's just from the light pollution. But back then, it was a clear sky. People always say, well, why do they only appear in farms and, the Midwest and the deserts and stuff? Because you can see them then. I mean, if you have the light pollution that you have in Manhattan, you're not going to see some black triangle going across the sky.
Just for the record, because you're in California, California every year leads the United States in UFO sightings. I mean, partly it's just a lot of people there, but there has always been a lot of recorded activity out on the West Coast of the United States.
And where do they see it? They see it in the deserts, in the mountain ranges, and in the more urban areas. Over the water. And over the water. Yeah. Over the water. One of the places I worked for, I had a perfect view of Catalina Island. And every night I had a view of this thing. I never saw anything out of Catalina. I thought I might. I really would have loved to see something. I never saw anything at all. But it definitely was a hotbed. Catalina Island was always being cited with people seeing things out there. But so those are some of the reasons why you like I said, there was nobody else to report to. Yeah. So APRO was picking up these reports. There was the sky was clear. You could see a lot more than you can today. And third, not today, everyone's looking at their phones. No one's looking up. Daytime, nighttime, they've got their head buried. They're not even looking up to cross the street. So, and you have a lot of clutter, what I call clutter, internet clutter. There are 1,000 podcasts on UFOs. And people will see things. And now it's not so fringe. People go, oh yeah, it's a UFO. They don't even care. So they go, yeah, no. But I can say that back during the 70s when I was with them, we weren't talking lights in the sky. It wasn't just I saw an unusual light, it zigzagged, and that was it. We're talking about structured craft. We're talking about alien contact, credible people. We had an excellent team. Of course, everyone's familiar with James McDonald, but we also had James Harder from Berkeley University engineer, Ray Fowler, and of course, Springfield. And there's a lot of misconceptions today. And again, I think this goes to the military-industrial complex trying to muddy the water because they don't want to go back into the history because the history opens everything. I hear it constantly today. Oh, well, why don't we have any good pictures? There are hundreds of excellent photographs going all the way back, even before Roswell, and film footage, and then later, videotape. And this was at a time when there was no desktop filmmaking. You couldn't go in and edit these things. And the stuff that came to our offices, we really scrutinized. We used every resource at the University of Arizona. We used the Kodak Center up in Phoenix. we really analyzed the hell out of it. Now, we never dissed anyone if we found that, something didn't look right. Go, well, thank you very much. Tell us if you see anything else. But there were many things that were truly, people say, well, it was unexplainable. Yes and no. Today they go like, well, it could be a Chinese drone. It could be this, it could be that. In any scientific endeavor, in any type of investigation, I look at Occam's razor. What's it most likely to be? I mean, if you've got the Lou, bless him, I mean, he's done a great job, him and Chris Mellon, in getting this information out there again. But the 5 observables, we observed those long before I ever got in. At hypersonic speed and beyond, that's nothing new. Cloaking, that's nothing new. Transmedium, there's nothing new. I mean,
that's right. They're all acting like this is all new thing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, we're discovering this new. We don't know what it is. But no, this is one reason I'm really glad you're here, is yet another really good data point to show that this goes way, way, way back.
Yeah, so, Wendell, who as I shared, was Jim's best friend. They were very close, and Wendell had the best archive of original photographs, mass sightings. I remember one was taken over Manhattan, broad daylight, from 2 different vantage points. It was seen by hundreds of people, and this was a clear, structured ship. And it had reference because you could see the skyscrapers and stuff around it and stuff. And it was taken from 2 different vantage points. And it goes all the way back. I know you did an excellent video on the airships of the 1900s. And there's not, other than, and you're quite right, the newspapers aren't like newspapers today, in a sense, in that they make up things. They did back then. I mean, they were more like magazines back then. They were just telling stories. But Wendell had 2 tintypes, and these weren't pictures of tintypes. These were original tintypes taken by a grandfather who was on his way to his granddaughter's birthday party, which were remarkable pictures of an airship. Now, you would call it an airship just because of the time, but it looked like a giant Tic Tac is what it looked like. It looked
really?
like yeah.
Do you know what time period, what year this would have been taken?
I think it was like 1901. It was the early 1900s.
Wow.
And this was clearly had reference. You could see mountains in the background. The first picture, he captured it, a profile, and then it turned into the clouds. It was going into the clouds, and still 3/4 of it were exposed. But it takes a long time to expose those old, cameras and stuff. It wasn't like just click one and click another one. But those were remarkable, and I don't recall those ever going online. I don't ever recall seeing them online anywhere or in magazines or anything. But Wendell kept a lot of his stuff close to his breast, because he knew, and you see that with investigators today, they don't like to share,
It's really true.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I don't know what it is.
It's the technocrats. Everyone thinks that they may have something special. Yeah. And if they can unwrap this mystery, they can be like the gods.
They get the glory.
Yeah,
well, I think there is definitely that. And I think, some of it is, at least from my perspective, when you get a confidential story, you cannot always give it up. You can't just betray someone's confidence. And there's a lot of that going on.
These weren't confidential. This was just, I think, in part ego. Hey,
I hear you.
Yeah.
So what happened when you went into APRO? I would love you to walk through, because look, you did the first interview with Travis Walton. Everyone knows who Travis is. You interviewed Charles Moody. I would love for you to talk about the Moody case, the William Herman case, which I don't think many people know about that one, and your interaction with Jesse Marcel Sr. There's a lot to go over here.
Sure.
And I would just love for you to talk about how that all of those came about.
Well, as I shared, my initial impression was I'm going to be working with Jim and Coral as an artist, basically.
They see a young guy who's like good at model making. They're like, we're going to use this guy. We're going to work him.
Well, too. You have to see. When I met them, I expected APRO. Okay, this is going to be like a technical operation. They're going to have a big office and blah blah blah. They had a picturesque little house with the white picket fence, and Jim met me at the door. Oh, come on in, and Coral, who did not take to people. I'm very proud of this because I really loved her and I loved Jim. And they took me right in. It was just like I was a member of their family. Small little house. Coral had her little typewriter under, hand, no electrics, nothing like that. Just
no, right.
And she had her whole little desk set up and where she wrote the books. I mean, this was really 1930s, 1950s, how they produce these books and stuff. And she spent the day there in the home. She was still, even in 1974, she was very frail. She rarely left the house. She left, in my understanding, only twice. Once to go to one of Jim's lectures, and second time to my wedding was the only time I ever saw her outside the house. She never came to the office. I did meet James McDonald once at our first office. I didn't speak to him. I, didn't even really know who he was other than, oh, this is somebody important. Talking to Jim. But they were in that little house. It wasn't long after that they got the first big office, which was just a couple blocks away. Looked like a school library. What was the impression? I've got some pictures. I've got to find that. There's a picture of me in that office. I'll find that and get that to you. But then in a couple of years, we got an even bigger office with very high security for the time. Today, you'd have homes that have better security than that, but at the time, it was very high security. And one of the things I asked myself is, where are they getting all this money? Because they had a full-time, secretary. Jim worked 5 days a week, took 2 days off. He was very 9 to 5, but his life was UFOs. This was all he and Coral did. They were really two minds in separate bodies. I mean, that's all they talked about. That's all they did. Never saw anything disagreeable between them, no arguments or anything. They were always very nice. Now, Coral was feisty. If she didn't like you, she didn't like you. Everyone knows about the Allan Hynek situation there.
She never trusted Allan Hynek, ever.
No. Now, he came to their house. He came to their house. I wasn't there. I was kind of being a fanboy. I'm like, oh, Allan Hynek. Oh, I want to meet this guy. But unfortunately, I missed him when he went by the house. But Jim told me about the meeting, and Coral all but threw him out of the house. She didn't like. Now, he did. Initially, he gave us kind of a backhanded compliment saying, hey, they're very professional and very scientific, but some of their members are kind of out there. But later on, he, did confess, because he wanted to be part of it, that, yeah, they're very good. They have very good research. And
what I remembered, I researched this a number of years ago. And what I had learned was that apparently he was trying to data mine APRO. He was trying to get like membership lists and I think Coral just thought, what is this? He's starting up his new organization, which became the Center for UFO Studies. And she just thought he was trying to steal from her membership.
He wanted them to work for him. Is basically when he came to the house, his proposal was, hey, I want to adopt you. Basically, I want to make your research. Well, he posed it, according to Jim, as like, oh, I want to work with you. It's going to be a symbiotic relationship and you're going to be equal partners. No, he wanted to take over. That's how Coral saw it. And again, it went back to, military industrial complex, security, and was the CIA involved. And I really believe, we know, at least as far as you can believe in Richard Dowdy, who was counter Air Force intelligence, was involved definitely after I left.
Doty?
Doty.
Yeah, Richard Doty, yeah.
Doty, yeah. That he definitely, from Air Force counterintelligence, was trying to get into the organization. And he claims, although I have no proof of this and I wouldn't want to defame her, said that he had bribed our secretary to give him information. I don't know if that's true or not, but I mean, again, you have to frame this in Cold War.
So Doty had bribed or tried to bribe the secretary to get in
through what's his name, Bill
Moore.
Bill Moore.
Yeah.
And
so to get what exactly out of APRO?
To get any information they could, telephone calls, letters, anything, any type of information. And they framed it as they were looking basically for Russian, Soviet at that time, trying to get that information.
Right.
And they were concerned they wanted to find the Soviet spies. And they knew, and I can tell you to this very day, if you go to any embassy, a consulate, anywhere here in the United States, and you stand in front of the embassy door, you've got 24 cameras looking at you from intelligence agencies all over the world. And if you know where those guys are, you want to get them and get them out of the country. Like here in San Francisco, we routed all the Russians and got them out a couple of years back. And everybody knows what's going on and everybody allows it. But back then, there was a much more serious tone about it. And if they could find out where the Russians were in Tucson, near our SAC base, near our nuclear ICBMs, if you could get them out of the water, fine. And would they be interested in UFOs actually as actual alien encounters or as special projects, maybe run by Davis Monthan? It'd be great to find out what's going on.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's what they were looking at.
You're right in the middle of it.
Yeah, it's not, people look at like with evil intent or that was, when you get into special projects and special access projects, stuff like that, you can't imagine how many people want that information. Just to know how many special access projects are there, just that kind of intelligence, everybody. And back then, again, there's no internet, spy tech, as listening devices and stuff. It's not like it is today. I mean, you can't pick up someone's communication by satellite. And, the NSA and all the stuff that they can do today is so far advanced to what they could do back then. So you had a lot of on the ground personal involvement in getting information. And if you could, I'm sure if she did give them information, she thought she was doing her patriotic duty.
Oh, if Coral did.
Not Coral, but our secretary.
Oh, the secretary. I see.
Yeah. Now, Coral and Jim, as we'll share later through these interviews, is my belief. I have no documented evidence, but that he was still working somewhere within Air Force intelligence, either as an asset or, basically uniform still.
Who? Which one are we talking about?
Jim Lorenzen. Jim Lorenzen. Yeah. And Coral would have known that, definitely would have known that.
Yeah.
And later on, when we get into the conversation, some things that happened with the Carter administration, that'll become more evident why I believe that. But Jim always, and again, based on my experience since that time, Jim always operated just like a, what you would call a spy master would operate, conduct this interview, give me the details, don't write anything down, and we did that. I mean,
what do you mean don't write anything down?
Don't write anything down.
Like when you're doing an interview with someone, but how
the only notes that I have, the only notes that I have that I hand wrote were of Betty Hill's conversation. That was it. And I don't
understand the logic of that, because if I'm doing an investigation, I want to interview someone, I got to take notes or I'm going to forget 50% or more of it.
No, I didn't. I, even to this day, and I used to train people in my later capacity. This is what we would actually had exercises, memory exercises. You'd give someone, and I've conducted this type of training many times with officers. You give someone a tray. It's got different items on it, and it's covered up. You reveal the items. They got 10 seconds to look at that. Then you cover it back up, and then you say, "Okay, now I want you to write from left to right what you saw." And you'd be surprised how people are like, they can't even remember the first thing they saw on that table.
I would be one of those people.
Yeah. But after a while, you get good at it. Now, why do you want to use that? Well, if you're doing counter espionage or you're doing surveillance detection, you want to be able to look at someone and go, and later on, you can't pull out a pad and notebook and go like, write down, 6'4".
Okay, well, fair enough. But why do it with a UFO investigation? I get it. If you're doing cloak and dagger stuff, you don't want to get caught with notes, but you're doing a UFO investigation. Why would you not want to write the data down?
That
is this a predilection of Jim Lorenzen? He just is like,
Yeah.
So
He
how
was
would you get
spent-
reports to him then? Like
he would debrief me, just basically debrief me. We'd
you do an
spend-
oral report.
yeah, oral report, top to bottom. And that's how we conducted everything. Now
I'm amazed.
the stuff that I've shared with you, illustrations and different things that were done,
Yes.
you know, that was my own thing, you know, for APRO. But when Travis Walton, that was the first big case. We were following it from the very abduction, and
You joined in
the-
74. Travis's thing happened in November of 75.
yeah, interesting. And I'll talk to you later too about that November 11th date. It's kind of interesting.
November 5th with Travis.
No,
Right.
no, but I interviewed him on November 11th.
On the 11th, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
It-
he was gone for 5 days. He
Yeah.
comes back on the 10th. You interviewed him on the 11th.
On the 11th. And
Amazing.
this how happened. I saw it. I actually saw in the newspaper that he had been, you know, returned. And I went home, called Jim. Jim says, yeah, we know. And he said, I'll be back with you. And he called me back and says, this is his room number. This is, you know, we spoke to his brother. Coral spoke to his brother, agreed to an interview. Give him a call. And then when you're done, call me and brief me. And that's exactly what happened. And I can say, having heard Travis retell it, he has not changed one note the entire time. Something that I shared with Jim, and this is an example of some of the things we held back, that we didn't give information, that we didn't write about. But when he described what happened to him and how this beam of light hit him when he stood up, I knew right away I had some understanding of aircraft. In Arizona, you have very dry air conditions for flying. And craft in the air will pick up an enormous static electric charge. If you have a Piper Cub or a small airplane and stuff, it actually has a chain that dangles. So when it lands, it grounds it to get that static electric charge off it. Because if you don't ground it and you come up to that plane, it's going to hit you. It won't just knock you on your rear end. It could kill you. I mean, it's that much of a static electric charge. And as soon as he described what happened, that he was crouching down, then he stood up, and he was the highest thing in that clearing next to the UFO, and he got hit with a beam of light. I go like, no, it's not a ray. He got hit with a static electric charge, because where they were up there in those woods, very dry. That's why they were deforesting it, to prevent the forest fires. It's
right.
Common practice up there. So that gave me right away, there's validity to what happened.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now, were you talking on the phone, or did you get to see him in person?
No, no, I never met him in person. I only talked to him that one time on the phone.
Okay.
And after that, that conversation, I called Jim and just shared the entire thing, top to bottom, what he had shared with me. Then Jim started arranging psychological interviews. The two psychologists, he had two. They did regressive hypnosis. They did regular personality inventories, things like that.
Yes.
And everybody agreed that no, he's not mentally ill, has no history of mental illness. He believes.
Yeah, people should know APRO was really the lead on the Travis Walton case.
Oh yeah.
I mean, everyone came in for this one, national media, but APRO really was.
We did polygraphs.
Definitely the lead.
Yeah, we did polygraphs. There was one of the guys in the truck who the polygraph came back inconclusive. Yeah. But I can share with polygraphs, because we use them in law enforcement all the time. They're more stress indicators, you know, they're a tool. You know, if they're not strictly going to tell you if you're lying or not lying, but if you're being really deceitful, they'll come up. We think that the one guy that was inconclusive, we thought he just looked away at the time. He said, "Oh yeah, I saw it," but maybe he didn't see it. You know,
I had read that he had been deemed to fail it because it turned out he was hiding a prior criminal conviction for something.
That's possible. I hadn't heard that.
That was the thing. So it was not really relevant to the sighting or the experience itself. That's what I had heard.
Yeah. They're polygraphs. I spoke to the one of two guys who invented the polygraph for the Army. He used to live in Orange County, California. And he said to me, Al, he says, you got a 50-50 chance. He said polygraphs are maybe good 50% of the time. So you look at that 50% of the time, and if someone within that range you got 80% accuracy, you can probably say they're probably being truthful. But it's not like you see in the movies where it's a truth teller. It's a tool. But there was Travis, like I said, he was rock solid. He described things. Now, here's another that came up again and again and again. It's not widely known. He described the ship as being uniform in color, monocolor, gray, and that all the corners were rounded. Everything was rounded, just as other abductees have commented who didn't know that detail. That
you're talking about the interior?
The interior of the ship.
Of the ship. Everything was rounded.
Everything was rounded. There were no sharp corners. There was no angles or anything like that. Everything looked, as Bob Lazar said, looked like it was melted in wax. You know,
yeah, like kind of molded to the structure, right?
Or 3D printed. You know, that's what the consensus now. And that's not a detail that we published, you know, ever. But it came up in other interviews of other people that were abducted. They said the same thing. Betty Hill said the same thing. Betty Hill said there was no colors on the ship. Everything was gray. Everything was monotone. And that everything was rounded. There was no sharp edges or corners and stuff. Again, that's not something that was highly published. And we kept that to ourselves so that if another abductee said, yeah, you know, describe the ship to us. You know, what was that interior like?
Sure.
They all described indirect lighting. You know, it was lit, but there were no lights. You know, there were no spotlight.
No visible source of the light.
And someone else who describes that is David Adair, the engineer.
Oh, yes. So you and I had a private conversation about David Adair, and you really got me thinking about him.
Yeah, he describes being shown what he believed to have been an extraterrestrial craft in a setting where this was a military setting, and he said there was no everything was lit up, but there was no direct lighting, and he couldn't figure out how that they were doing that. He asked, and they told him to shut up. You know, just
now wait. Did you meet David Adair, or did you just study his case?
No, I just studied. When I first learned about him, I wanted to know more and more about him because he was the real deal. He was very interested in rocketry. I was interested in rocketry. He did his stuff. Is a member is on record, in the congressional record. So he's a real deal. He's a lot, and I think that's why they stay away from him, because he can prove what he says.
I'm going to say this. We talked about this on the phone, but I'm just going to say it here. So I met David Adair back in 2019, not that long ago, about 3 years ago. And I found him to be brilliant. I mean, brilliant.
Yeah.
A brilliant man. There is no other way. Very gracious, very, very nice. But I said this to David, so I'll say it here. I heard him tell like some stories that just seem utterly fantastic. And I said, David, you're either the most real deal of all time, or you're the greatest BS artist I've ever heard. And I really couldn't figure him out. And then, you know, part of it, I was at this event in Manchester, UK, and I was sitting next to Mike Barra, who's another researcher, and David Adair's there. And here's David on the stage talking about during the Apollo 11 thing, knowing the Neil Armstrong family and talking with them. And I remembered Barra and I were whispering back and forth to each other saying, do you believe this? I don't know if I believe. And it's just so fantastic, but you're saying he did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He tells a great story, and all of us have stories about where we were when we saw Armstrong walk on the moon.
Yeah.
And when that comes up in dinner conversation, he's a little shy about talking about it because he literally slept in Armstrong's childhood bed that night because he watched the moon landing with Armstrong's mother at his house there.
I don't know how you know this and you're so confident about it, but you seem very confident.
I'm absolutely confident about it. He would actually, used to help his mother can fruits and vegetables there.
Well, maybe it's true. I mean, he is, then you know, he does a lot of work currently for other
Yes. Yeah,
governments
he
and
is.
entities, which he said to me. And again, I didn't really know how to take it, but you're saying yes.
Oh yeah, he has dozens of patents with NASA, other uh, uh, aerospace companies. He is working with a Middle Eastern government.
Yeah, yeah.
They want him to head his.
That's what he said to me.
Yeah, and
Well, I'm going to say, wow. I mean, it's not
we
that I
can talk
completely
offline about
disbelieved
it.
him, but
Yeah, and I can.
I'd have some doubts.
Information. No,
I will say.
he's, and I did too. That's why I researched it. I go like, this can't be true. He tells a story about how, you know, this fusion rocket that he built again, which is a matter of record. It's not contrived or anything. They asked, well, what kind of lifting body do you need? And he said, well, what's the biggest thing you got? And now he was a prodigy. He was 17 years old when this happened.
Right. And he's out in Nevada doing rocket launches for them there.
Yeah. And he said, they asked him, well, and he said, well, what's the biggest thing you got? And he says, well, the biggest thing we have is Gemini Titan lifting body. He says, okay, let's go with that. And there is, and you can go on the internet and find it. There's a congressional record where Congress said, yeah, give him the.
Now you can't talk about a fusion reactor. I mean, by the way, I want to get back to APRO in a minute, but
Sure.
This is too interesting.
Yeah.
So we can't do nuclear fusion. We don't do controlled fusion, right? So
no, we have had limited success with fusion. I mean, there are a number of companies that have done fusion, but it's only for seconds. It's like 5 seconds, 6 seconds. In fact, I just saw 2 new papers. The second attempt, it lasted like 5 seconds or so. But that's all his rocket did too. It basically was almost like an impulse. The containment field, the magnetic containment field that was used for fusion, lasted for just a fraction of a second. But that's all you needed to contain the fury of that fusion explosion. And they didn't go with the Titan lifting body because after they looked at it, he said, well, what's going to happen to that is this fusion engine is going to go right through the body and it won't even lift the rocket. It'll just go right through the body and leave the rocket on the launch pad. And so they built their own custom body for this rocket. And again, it's a matter of record. It's not.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a whole other.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. You should get a hold of David and have him tell it because he's much more entertaining to tell it. He refers to himself, so I'm not dissing him, but he refers to himself as the hillbilly Elon Musk. And I would not differ with that. I mean, that's one of the things that's hard because you look at him and you listen to his voice because he has a very pronounced Southern accent. You think, is this guy for real? But I looked into him. I go like, yeah,
he's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. And I feel bad. Back in 2019, I was sitting with him. I was with Linda Moulton Howe, I was with my wife Tracy. We had a couple of other folks. And this is when I first met him. I spilled a full glass of red wine all over him. I just knocked it over.
Yeah.
That was how I introduced myself to David Adair.
Yeah.
I was a little embarrassed.
Yeah.
But he was very gracious.
Yeah, he's someone who, if I was doing that congressional investigation, he's someone I would have behind closed doors there.
Well, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So let's go back to APRO because I want to hear.
So Travis
Walton investigation.
Yeah, that was the first big case, and as I shared, a lot of things that he shared with myself during that interview, and we kept it close, close to our vest, and the descriptions of the aliens. Now, there's one thing, and I'm not going to share it on screen, but there's something that he shared about the aliens' physiology that we found in the Moody case, in the Betty Hill case, and in the Herman case that we've never published before.
Can you describe this or talk about it?
I'll describe it to you offline because I don't want it out there so that if this comes up again, we can say, yeah, they really saw these.
All right.
They really saw these. But it's just a biological oddity of these creatures, and I'm not talking about their fingers or the shape, but there's something that's very distinctive. and that all of them noted. And it's something that's so kind of off the wall. It's not something someone would make up. If you were describing an alien, you would say this about them. But
Wow.
yeah, but in fact, of those notes, like I said, the only notes that I have are the ones I took with Betty Hill. That's one of the things I noted because I go, oh, I've heard this before.
I'm going to try to wheedle this out of you at some point.
Yeah.
But do you want to talk about the Charles Moody case? Because that actually happened a month earlier, or the summer.
No, it
before,
happened after
August of '75.
Yeah, it happened after Travis.
No, before Travis is November of
before?
'75. Chuck Moody was August.
I know it was 75. I don't remember the exact month.
Yeah.
But Moody,
but you know a lot about this case. You actually know a lot about this case.
I interviewed him several times.
I would like you to describe this for listeners, because I think a lot of people do not know this incident, and it's a very, very important, I think, a very important abduction case.
Absolutely. Because he was such a good observer. You've got a sergeant.
He's Air Force.
White Sands. Yeah, Air Force sergeant at White Sands.
Mm-hmm. And
this occurred. And again, people today also, well, why does this always happen, in their bedroom? And no, this happened at sunset. It was in the evening. He went out to the desert. He had a Corvette. He went out there to watch a meteor shower. And he was sitting on the hood of the car, watching the meteor shower come down. And he saw something that looked like a meteor initially. And I think there's some reasons from a physics standpoint why these things look like bright lights from distance. And then when they get up close, you can actually see the ship. But anyway, it looked like a bright light and started racing towards him. And he thought, oh my God, it's a meteor, it's going to crash here. And as it came up out of the dark, he could see a dull gray saucer-shaped ship.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, he's filled with kind of panic. What is this? Is it going to hit me? It stops dead in front of him. And he said before he knew it, these creatures were out. They grabbed him. There were 4 of them. And in the dark, looking at their faces, he thought they were Chinese because of the shape of the eyes. And
this is actually very wide. This happened a lot in those early years. People would say they looked, they would use the word Oriental, they look Chinese. One way or another. You'd hear that a lot.
Yeah, I think today, and I don't want to diss anybody's report, but when we get into the eyes aren't as big as people. I think what's happening is they're just from their memory, and they're so awestruck that, oh my God, the eyes were huge. Well, you got a much smaller humanoid,
mm-hmm.
with yes, their heads are larger. Imagine them like an adolescent child. The proportions are almost like they're like someone who more like a midget. I don't know if that's politically correct.
I was supposed to say that word.
Yeah. Well, I'd say from a physiological standpoint, because midgets, as opposed to dwarfs, when they grow up, their body proportions are like
right.
But whereas a midget, the head is larger in proportion to the body, and you have almost a cross between these creatures.
Well, actually, in dwarfism, the head is larger in proportion to the body, I think, right?
No, it's the opposite. Midget head is larger than proportion body. Dwarfs are dwarf. Anyway, it's one of the two. But these creatures, they're more formed like an adolescent child, but the eyes.
So you're saying the head was more in a human proportion, more of a normal proportion to the body?
No, it was larger.
The head was larger
compared to the body because it's more adolescent, slimmer, and stuff. So let's say you take like a 12-year-old girl and put an adult head on it, something like that. It's going to look big to you when you're looking at it, but it's not so big that it's like,
outrageous or that.
Yeah,
it's just a little larger than you'd expect.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so he thought, hey, these are Chinese. They're capturing me. You didn't know what was going on. They dragged him to the ship. He said they totally overpowered him strength-wise. And he was very embarrassed about that. He kept bringing that up, that he couldn't understand it, how they overpowered him and got on the ship. And he was conscious this entire time, didn't lose consciousness. And they got him on the ship. He can't move. the one that he describes as the leader came over to him, and he says, you know, we'll let you go if you promise not to, you know, lose your mind, get feisty and everything. We'll release you, because he was like paralyzed.
He was a big guy, I think. I think I read that he was kind of a big guy.
Yeah. And as I said, he was embarrassed. He wanted to fight these guys off, you know, and he couldn't. So he agrees that he's going to do that, that he'll mind his, you know, won't act out. And so they released him. And this is something that I've shared with you, and I'm sharing it for the first time publicly. Like I said, he kept his head and he asked intelligent questions. First question he asked his leaders, who are you? You know, and the leader gave a very succinct and answer, which I believe goes to the agenda and alien agenda. And I'm not talking about every alien agenda, because I know from APRO's history, there are thousands of cases, and there's no one explanation for everything. But there are better explanations for some things than there are others. Today, the water is being really muddied by, oh, they're time travelers. They're us from the future. This is an affective consciousness. This is angels or demons. It's metaphysical. The affective consciousness keeps coming up, and to me, what they're saying is it's in your imagination. No, we at APRO, this is one thing that we looked at this not just as scientists, because we wanted data, we wanted to be able to measure it, but we also looked at this as an investigator. Okay, what can we prove from eyewitness testimony? People today talk about experiencers. I hate that term. I want to talk to an eyewitness. Okay, they may be a victim of a criminal act, in this case, abduction, but I want to talk to an eyewitness. What did they observe? What did they hear? What did they say? What did they smell? What did they feel? Was it hot? Was it cold? All these things, does that all make sense? And people aren't asking those questions. You know, they go, well, it's my truth. It's either real or it's not. You know, when I've shared my case, like I shared with you, it's not my truth. It's what I saw. It's not what I experienced. It's what happened. I'm looking at it. This is what I saw. This is what occurred. This is where it occurred, when it occurred, things like that. So
these are attitudes all that happened before the revolution.
Yeah, before the revolution. I
I
seriously believe that that's the intelligence complex going in and muddying the water. Well, it could be this.
Oh,
it could be that. You know, and you go like, well, yeah, man, that sounds from the future. Because when it comes down to it, to human beings, we still, even in what we refer to as the UFO community, we still cannot wrap our heads around that there could be alien civilizations visiting the planet. It's got to be something.
I think you're right. I think many people. So you were saying Charles Moody asked them, "Where are you from?" And
where
that led you into this. And so where did that? What did they?
Well,
who are you? I think
who are you?
Who are you? Yes.
He said, and he said it in a very specific order. He said, "We're explorers. We're historians. We're scientists. We're traders, and we're doctors." Just like you. That's how he described them. Now, people go like, wow, that's the agenda. And NASA would love that same agenda. Any space program, yeah, that makes total sense. One of the interesting aspects of that is that we're traders. Now, I heard that before. I heard that with Betty Hill. I heard, in fact, they laid out on the star map. This is our routes of exploration. These are places we go all the time. These are trade routes. So,
right.
And that was not well known. Moody certainly did not. He didn't know anything about the Betty Hill case. And so that was the description they gave him. And he wanted to know all about the ship. Show me around. How does this ship work? And so, well, we'll show you. And one of the things the leader said, he says, your people could build one of these now if they wanted to, which I thought was, wow, what does he know that we don't know? How would he know that we could do this?
Yeah.
And we've chosen not to. why? I mean, so
maybe,
they took
maybe we didn't know we had the ability, or
I think partly to deviate, just saying, I think one of the things is, as a scenario, imagine this. You're a trader. You come to this planet, you go, hey, we'd like to establish trade. Now people talk about, oh, we got a treaty. Well, no, there's no treaty. It didn't go through Congress. No one signed on the dotted line, but I can see a loose net trade agreement, maybe with the military. And they go like, okay, what do you want? Well, we want this. Well, we want technology. Oh, well, we can give you technology, but honestly, the fuel we use, we only have that on our planet. So it's not like you can just refuel here, throw it in there. We're more than glad to give you a couple of ships or whatever, but that material that we make them out of, that's found on a star, 10 light years from here. So I don't know if it's going to do you any good. Oh, no. We'll figure it out. Just give it to us. We'll figure it out. No questions asked. Okay, if you want it, but we're telling you, you don't have what you need to fly these things around for any length of time. Well, can we get a little fuel? Okay, yeah, well, we can give you some fuel, but when it's gone, it's gone. So,
do you think this is what happened?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that's what happened. And again, from an intelligence standpoint, we don't understand. They go like, well, why would they still be looking to figure these guys out or looking for them, or whatever? We spy on our friends. We spy on the UK. We spy on the French. We spy on the Israelis. Not because we're evil. We just want to stay ahead of the game. We want to know, what do they know about us? What can we learn about them that they're not telling us? This is the whole thing with intelligence. What is intelligence? Intelligence is learning your enemy or opponent's secrets and keeping yours. And then using that knowledge in the appropriate manner for an advantage. That's all of intelligence. And so even if you have 8 or 9 ships that you're trying to back engineer, you want to find out, what are they saying about us behind our backs? Are they really here doing what they said they're doing? Is the trade agreement that we're doing, are they keeping that trade agreement, or are they doing something else? They have other plans that we don't know about. And so I really believe that's what went on. Everyone that I interviewed that had such close communication with these creatures, it was never malevolent. It wasn't threatening. They seemed to be as curious about speaking to a live human being as we would be speaking to them. And they, again, from an intelligence standpoint, I agree with Lou on this. You have to look at it as a threat, not again from a malevolent standpoint, but just like to look at film, the last couple of Superman movies there, they go like, oh, he could be a threat. If he ever turned on us, he could destroy the entire planet, and Superman goes, look, I was born in Kansas. I live raised in Kansas. I'm as apple pie and America as anybody. Well, say with this guy's, hey, if they ever turn on us, yeah, we got a friendly agreement with them now, but if they turned on us, we need to know how to take them down. And so what else with the they shared, he says, how does the ship work? And he describes there were 3 levels in the ship. He was on the middle level. They took him down to the lower level, and this was something else that we didn't put in any of the bulletins, but they showed him what are referred to today as gravity emitters. He described them identical to what Herman described them as, and what later Bob Lazar, almost a decade later, would describe them as. He said they looked like 55-gallon drums hanging off PVC piping. He said they could move. There were no wiring. And in the craft he was in, there were domes on the bottom of the ship that these emitters. Amazon. Thank you. That these emitters were used, and they as they describe them, they could use them to either fly in atmosphere or out of atmosphere, and there were different configurations. They didn't use them all at the same time. They could direct the fields, the gravity fields and stuff by turning these. But he was actually down there. This was large. This particular ship was large enough that he could stand upright down in this lower section. There was a third section above, but he didn't go into that section. He did get toured around that area that he first came onto the ship with, and described, as Lazar would later describe, Herman and Betty, that it's all monocolored. There was no obvious, control mechanisms per
Right.
se. Everything was scaled down. It wasn't, he didn't fit well, in there because he's a big
Too
guy.
big. Yeah.
Yeah. And they performed medical experiments, not medical experiment, a medical exam on him. It was the first time we had heard about implants, which is kind of like unfortunate because we didn't know it was an implant, that there was an implant. When they released him, the leader
So
said,
you're saying there was an implant?
we believe there was, because of a wound they had on the lower, on the base of his skull.
Mhm.
The leader said, in a week or two, he says, you're not going to remember this at first, but in a week or two, when you remember this, he said, you're going to need to go get that wound checked out and make sure, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And when they released him, he didn't remember anything. A couple weeks later, he gets a pain at the base of his skull and takes a mirror, looks at it, and there's an incision in the back of his skull. And he develops a rash, which was later determined to be some type of reaction to radiation exposure on his back. And that was documented by the Air Force. Now, he reached out to APRO, spoke to Jim. Jim turned him over to me. I started conducting interviews. I spoke with him 3 times. He was on base. The 4th time I tried to contact him. Well, I asked Jim, I said, what do you think is going to happen? Because I said, when this comes out, this is going to be, I was very naive at the time. I thought it would come out. I thought this is going to be on the news. This is going to be we can't keep this a secret. Here's someone who's had direct communication with these things. There's physical evidence on his body. The Air Force corroborates it. Yeah, he's got radiation exposure. He's got incision. We didn't know to look for an implant at the time. We didn't know anything about those things. We thought it was just some type of incision made for, some type of medical.
Right.
Yeah. And so I said, what's going to happen to him? And Jim very stoically says, the Air Force is going to ship him off to the farthest reaches they can. And I go, no, to me, I go like, that's movie stuff. They're not going to touch it. It's too obvious. I called the base, I want to speak to Sergeant Moody. He's gone. I go, gone. Yes, he's been transferred. I said, where? Alaska.
Hopefully not Point Barrow. That's like
maybe Cape Liz. That's a radar station up there. I go like, where? We can't tell you. I go, why can't you tell me? We can't talk about this anymore.
They moved him out of there.
He was gone. I never saw or heard of him again. Nothing. There was nothing. We put a little bit about the story in one of the bulletins, but we didn't reveal everything. But they kept a tight lid on that, and it's
I remember. I have. I think they have the APRO edition where Coral, I think, wrote about him, and I think they put his case in one of their books. I seem to recall.
Yeah, I'd have to go through it's nothing that came. It was nothing like Travis's.
No, it's a heck of a case though, and it never got the attention that Travis Walton's case got. But in its own way, it's every bit as spectacular, frankly.
Oh, absolutely. He had so much detail. That's why I kept calling him and kept interviewing, because he kept his head. Most people, and I'm not dissing Travis, but Travis, and I understand, he kind of freaked out, when he wakes up, and there's these strange creatures around him, and he jumped up. He said he was 22 years old. He was a young guy as well. Yeah. Lumberjack kind of guy, and he jumped up and grabbed what he thought was a glass tube, and he was going to break it to defend himself with, and he hit it on the counter and it didn't break. and the aliens just backed out of the room. They just go like, okay. They raised their hands and backed out. So they were afraid. This is the thing. It's something else that people don't understand. We all, every time we hear all these creatures, they must be millions of years in advance. We don't even know if they built these ships. They might have crashed on their planet. They might have had a trade agreement with some other system that they get these crafts from. Um, we don't know the history.
Oh, that's right. They
Yeah.
could have them contracted out to them.
Yeah, yeah, they might have shot them down on their planet, back engineered them, and now they use them. How advanced are they? We don't know. We have no idea. And just because you have a Lamborghini doesn't make you any smarter than anybody else. You know, we have very advanced technologies today. Some of them are frightening. People talk about nuclear weapons stuff. There is stuff a lot scarier than nuclear weapons that we have out there. And that doesn't make us the pinnacle of, you know, intellectual intelligence, advanced technologies. It's just, we've got these cool toys that we can use. But these creatures, they have emotions. They are mortal. We have their bodies. I mean, that's the consensus, that somewhere somebody knows where those bodies are hidden. So they live and die just like us. They can be killed in a crash, and they haven't displayed emotions. Just you shared this in one of your videos earlier. The fact that they're explorers, they have aspirations. They have desire. They want to learn about the universe, and they know that they can learn something for other civilizations, other planets.
Well, certain things are important to them. It's obviously important for them to be here and to be working Earth at this time and interacting with human beings. It seems to me it's something that's of a high priority for those groups that are here.
And it's to have that kind of investment. It's not going to be a little thing. If you're going to go to a planet more than once, and you go, oh, we've got something here we don't have someplace else. We need what they've got, whatever that is. Right. My personal opinion is that this is...
Well, we're going to talk about genetic harvesting down the road, because I know that that's a big concept that you believe. I think there's a lot to that. I think you're definitely...
So whatever they want, it's here. That's going to take a Herculean effort if they're coming from another, star system to come here and do it. Some of the things that I think even the best, and all these, Puthoff, Kit Green and Eric Davis and stuff, they think like scientists. They don't think like investigators. They don't think like military strategists. They think like scientists. They want data. Let's get the data. That'll prove our case. In your last interview, excellent video of a young man who did a deep dive into how a lot of this started. They go like, hey, maybe we can contact these creatures to CE5. Picture this. You got a Russian spy plane, flying over the United States. Some amateur gets his radio link and contacts him in the plane. Hey, what are you doing up there? Can you turn around? Can you stop? Can you come on back? If you see an alien spacecraft that's come from thousands of light years flying across the sky, if you can telepathically communicate with them, are they going to go like, oh, wait, someone's calling us?
Well, there's story after story. People claim this,
They do
hasn't happened to me.
They do claim it, that they can call these things on. If that is, to me, that sounds like a deer in the woods. I make this deer call and the deers all come out. They're on assignment. They're going from point A to point B to do something. Maybe if they're done with whatever their work is for the day, and they go like, oh, there's some guy meditating in San Jose. Let's stop by and see what he's got to say. Maybe we can learn something interesting. We got 10 minutes. We don't have to be back for another, light year. Let's stop and just see what the locals, what they're doing. And that's eminently possible. I just think that 90%, that's 90% of what they're doing. They're these black triangles in the middle of the night over a residential area. They're on a mission. They're on a project. They've been told, go out here and do this.
Oh yeah.
And they're not going to be pulled away. Oh, wait a second. There's a guy who just came back from a party. He's doing a CE5 thing. Would stop what you're doing. Let's go over there and talk to him. If you have time, it's just like if you go out to an Air Force event, and what they call it, an airfare where they got all
like an air show or
an air show, yeah.
Yeah.
And the pilots may have time at that point to stop and chat with you, and the B-2 bomber, it's a great ship and stuff, and here's a patch, and stuff. But I'd say 9% of the time, no, that's not happening.
Okay.
If you want to crack this mystery, you have to go to the people and say, yeah, I was there, I saw it, I touched it, I'm involved with it, we're back engineering it, and there's plenty of those people out there. That's where you're going to crack the mystery, because the people that have this stuff, they're not interested in the science for the most part. They're interested in what they can do with that science that they already have. They're not going to pull in because I know how I would feel in a scientific arena. This should be shared with the world. You shouldn't be hiding this stuff. It shouldn't be only yours. And that opens a whole can of worms. Who do you let in? You're not going to let the Chinese in. You're not going to let the Iranians in. And they're going to get ticked as all get out. We want to know. Now, Bob Lazar says that we did have the Russians involved for a short time. And then they came up with some discovery and they kicked them off. Now it's range. They said, no, this is too good to have. We're not sharing it with anybody. Get the hell out. And they threw them off the base. So, you've speculated what do the Russians know? How I remember when we were doing the Paris strikeouts thing and we were sharing space stations and doing all that. And we're still sharing rides up there and stuff. But the Russian technology, their lifting bodies are great, but their technology is way, way, way behind what we have in
terms of space stations and
exploration. I did a security event a few years back. The convention was about how the popular film has influenced technology. The inventor of the Star Trek mobile phone, was influenced by the communicators that he saw in Star Trek as a kid. And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of bleed over where CIA has actually come to Hollywood and said, hey, can you really do this? Can you make this or whatever? So that's what the convention was about. And part of my function there was security. We had 24 astronauts there, only one female. And I was speaking to her. We had on display a Russian spacesuit. And Richard, it was frightening. I could have made that suit on my kitchen table. It was, if you wore that in space, you took your life in your hands. I mean, it literally was nothing more than ballistic nylon with latex painted on the inside. You could see the brushstrokes. And I said, you wore this female astronaut I talked to her. She says, yeah. She says, you could only wear it for like 20 minutes at a time because the pressure leaked like crazy. You got into it, you laced it up, tied it off, they pressurized it, and you had 20 minutes before your blood started boiling. That's how far behind they were. Now, I've also seen what they never used it, but what would have been their landing module on the moon, they would have died. They would have died. I mean, you had to manually mix the fuel as you landed by turning one valve 3 or 4 times, turning the other valve precisely 3 or 4 times. They would have crashed. There's no way. I mean, we almost crashed. We came within 20 seconds of fuel left, for the landing. There's no way they would have. So sharing technology, they learned a lot from us, but in regards to this alien back engineering, they said, no, thank you. Thank you for coming. You see enough, get the hell out.
Wow. Very interesting. Can I ask, can we stay on APRO a little longer? Or
sure. Oh, absolutely.
I don't mean to be taking, everything you're saying is interesting. So
yeah.
I think
after the Moody case, and he was disappeared.
He goes off to Alaska.
Yeah.
And has never heard from him again. Whatever happened to him?
I looked for him.
No one knows, right?
Nobody knows. I've never been able to find him anywhere on the internet.
He's kind of disappeared.
I haven't done a deep dive. I've done stuff like that. I've even found people's who were adopted. I found their parents for them, and which is a very difficult task. But you can find pretty much anybody today. I've never found him. I don't know what happened to him.
Fascinating.
Yeah, the Air Force took that very, very seriously. And so
Now you talked about a William Herman case, and
yes.
I have to say I didn't know about this case, but it was obviously very important.
Yeah,
and,
Wendell was very interested in this case too, and he made
now this one I have some visuals that you provided.
Yes.
And when you get into the story, I'm going to share those.
Yeah, Herman, again, these are one of these things that people say, oh, they only catch, people are only abducted in the middle of the night out of their beds. No, Herman was outside his home. He saw a UFO.
Is this South Carolina or?
Yes, South Carolina.
Okay.
Charlotte, was it Charlotte, North Carolina or South Carolina? I'd have to
maybe North Carolina.
Yeah. This was at the time, and this will be more important later. At the time, there's nuclear submarine bases stationed off the coast that were being buzzed by a UFO of a similar description. That made a lot of news, and the Carter administration was approached, hey, what are you going to be doing about this? You've got these things buzzing our submarine pens and stuff. And what about this? What are you guys doing? And what was his name? Powell was the spokesman for Carter at the time.
Jody Powell.
And he said, well, we're looking into it. We're not going to talk about that, but we're looking into it.
So wait, these were events of they weren't talking about UFOs, but something was buzzing or.
No, they were talking about UFOs. They were specifically talking about UFOs. It was same description that Herman later saw, glowing orange, saucer shape.
Wow. Okay.
It was while they were in what's referred to as the submarine pens. It was why they were harbored. It wasn't out at sea. This was while they were in the pens.
I have to say, I had no idea that this came up as an issue with the Carter administration, like in a public way.
It was on ABC News. I remember the report very distinctly, in the interviews from it, and that I'm sure that's probably open source on.
It should be. I'm just. I wish I had known about it.
Yeah. That was.
Yeah.
I think you've already covered that in some of you covered 1977, didn't you, in some of your videos?
Oh yeah, in one of my books I covered the late 70s, and what I thought was quite a bit of detail, but that was that was a very
important factor. And Herman's outside, sees this UFO in the field, hovering over field, glowing orange, 3 protuberances coming out of the bottom. He also described like a flashing cross-looking light display on the bottom of the craft. So he goes out to get a better look at it. And the next thing he remembers is waking up in a vacant lot miles from his home. And he doesn't know how he got there. And he realizes from his watch that several hours have gone by. All he remembers is walking out to that field to see the ship, and then he wakes up, miles away.
Can I show this? This is a screen share. This is a model you created?
This is a model that I created for APRO, for something we'll talk about later.
This was for his sighting, though. Am I?
Yeah, that was the description of the UFO that he claimed to see. The model was later displayed under black light, so it looked like glowing. He described it as lava-like. Now, I did see a video.
This drawing is also of his.
Yeah. Of the craft.
There's one other, I think.
Yeah, I said yes.
You did these drawings.
He did them.
He did these.
Yeah,
these are excellent.
Herman did these drawings. Now, I also sent you a picture too of underneath of the model, I think. I don't know if you have that picture. Underneath of the models, because you can see the.
Oh, yes. Let me share this here.
Yeah.
I do have it. I just need to go back to my screen wherever you are.
That's okay.
I'm not sharing it, am I? Hold on, let me just.
Technology.
All right, there you are. Okay, go over to screen share, and this is it.
Yeah, you can see the panels underneath there. He said those panels flashed. He saw it only from a distance, but he said to make out, it looked like kind of a cross arrangement underneath it. Now, these pods are interesting because they're exactly what Moody described. And later on, a decade later, what Bob Lazar would describe, that there were, 3 gravity emitters on the bottom. Now, something else, and we've never shared this before, but I will share it for the first time. What they told Moody and also told Herman was that they were able to recharge their ships from nuclear reactor sources. If there was nuclear reactor, submarine, ship, nuclear reactor generated electricity, somehow they were able to glean and recharge their ships, just like you would charge a wireless, charge your phone on a wireless battery charger,
So they were siphoning energy that we were creating.
Yes, exactly.
For their own purposes.
Yeah. And it made, because even then in the 70s, now it's very common knowledge, but back then it wasn't so well known. Why are they at Malmstrom? Why are they at the submarine pens? Mm-hmm. Why are they seen at nuclear reactors? Because it's not like if they're traveling the stars, they know all about nuclear reaction. I mean, it's not like, oh, yeah, what are these guys doing? Mm-hmm. Often they could, they're here to stop us from killing ourselves. What they said, hey, we use these things to charge our ships.
Is what they said to Herman?
They said that to Herman and to Moody as well, that they're able to recharge their ships by getting close proximity to the same. I actually think that's what happened at Malmstrom.
So to our nuclear tech, they're able to somehow, I don't know how, I wouldn't understand how that is done, but they are able to do that.
It definitely would have to be similar to how we do it with charging, like a telephone, like a cell phone, wirelessly. Okay. I don't know if they they're gleaning some electromagnetic field from the nuclear reaction and charging up their online batteries. Maybe they have more than one type of propulsion system, because they seemingly have 2 different modes of flight. People have described them. Well, if we go to more modern ones like the Tic Tac, they observed the Tic Tac hovering for almost 18 hours. Well, no one ever asked, okay, what's the flight capabilities? How long can they stay out there? Is it indefinitely? If they have fuel, that fuel's got to be expended at some point. Mm-hmm. We know with fighters, jet fighters, you can fly a jet fighter for, 2-3 hours. But if you go into afterburner mode, you've got 4 minutes. That's it. And you're out of fuel. Is it the same with these ships? Can they go out and hover on the Earth's magnetic field or gravitational field for hours or days? But if they have to, use their gravity field propulsion to jump back to their star system or to the moon or wherever, is that just like bang, they use up all their fuel? They may go like, hey, we're being chased. We got to get the hell out of here. Mm-hmm. Kick it into, the high speed, and they got 4 minutes of fuel, and then we're out and we're not back, and they crash.
Interesting.
It could be.
I don't think a lot of I don't know how much discussion of this nature really one hears in the UFO field. I mean, there's some very, very astute scientists who do talk about energy and propulsion and the like, but I'm not sure if this is really brought up.
They're not thinking like a military strategist. They're not thinking like an intelligence officer, because you want to learn their secrets and keep yours. We don't want them to know how our missiles work. We don't want them to know what surveillance technologies we have. We don't want them to know what type of directed energy weapons we have. If we have discovered a way to bring down their ships, we might not use it on them, but if we had to, we might. If they became hostile, if it was like the Superman imperative where he turns evil, if these guys turn evil, hey, we've got this in our back pocket. We can take these ships down. They don't even know it, because once they know it, they create countermeasures to get around it. Now, Wendell had believed back in the day that, there was radar. We were using directed energy, microwaves, radar to bring these craft down. He had a plot plan of all the crashes in New Mexico, northern Arizona, something that we were very well aware of in APRO. And again, this is rewritten history. oh, no one knew about Roswell until the 80s. No, we knew about Roswell. We knew about Kingman. We knew
Yeah,
about Alistair.
I want to ask you about the Roswell part of it because, again, the first Roswell book was published in 1980, but you're with APRO all through most of the 70s, and you're saying that, yeah, Roswell was well known.
Even before I started with APRO, it was common knowledge, at least in Arizona. I mean, I discussed it with other people, just
and presumably in New Mexico as well.
Yeah, it's just common knowledge. But see, it didn't. If you look back at that time, you go like, well, it wasn't written down. They were, yeah, because we didn't have the internet. They weren't publishing, hundreds of magazines and stuff. This was very compartmentalized socially. We talked amongst ourselves, but no one's writing this down.
Yeah,
no one's doing exposés on
so
this.
What was the thing that people knew in the 70s, like in the mid 70s? What would you say was the extent of the story that people knew about Roswell?
The extent of the story was exactly what. Now, well, let me share what happened, how it began. Speaking, this was the only interview that Jim sat with me to take. He, when I got into APRO, I expressed, hey, I want to know about retrievals. I want to know about alien physical types because I thought this is my forte. I'm going to do a catalog.
This is 1974.
1974. Yeah.
And you said, I want to know about retrievals of UFOs?
Yes. Yes. 1974. And it wasn't, like I said, it was common. People knew. It wasn't like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, the first, and I shared this with you, the first one that Jim showed me was the Kecksburg retrieval. He had a lengthy file on that and witness drawings of what they saw at the scene. And we quickly, for reasons I shared with you, eliminated, we know what this is.
You believe that was a satellite?
Yeah, I believe it was a Russian satellite. One of the drawings of it being loaded onto the military thing. Now, these are witness drawings, so they're not, they're not like an artist or anything. But the witness drawing, it had a big red star on the side of it, and I go like, well, obviously, this guy didn't. This wasn't. They didn't have these red stars from Alpha Centauri.
One of the, it's funny. I've been talking with Stan Gordon just recently. Stan Gordon is probably knows more about the Kecksburg event than anyone that I know. So I'm going to ask him about that. I don't think he believes that explanation. I don't think that he believes it.
Because we did have a treaty with the Russians to return anything that we found out. Because again, and I know this from living in the Bay Area and Palo Alto and within a year after Sputnik, we had satellites that were capable of photography as good as Google Earth is today. Project Corona, Gambit, and Hexagon. It wasn't until digital telemetry took over in 77 that we started, we don't need to shoot something up and get the camera back anymore. But we were on top of that right away, and we had a treaty. Hey, if we lose something of ours over there, you're going to return it, and we get something of yours, we're going to return it. I'm not going to return it. No way in the world. So it was claimed that Russian satellite landed in Canada. No, I think it landed in Kecksburg.
Okay.
Covered it up.
Fair enough.
So
Jim's giving you the files on Kecksburg, so you're looking at that. Kecksburg. This is in 74.
This is in 74.
And then what about Roswell?
We got Roswell came up. Now, since we've been talking, I tried to place by looking at my notes exactly when it was that I spoke to Jesse. It was either late 77 or early 78.
Jim, I think Stanton Friedman. I'm assuming you got Jesse Marcel after Stanton got him.
I've heard Stanton give me two dates. One, I heard him say it was 1980 when he interviewed him. Another time,
no.
That's I heard
Stan said that.
Yeah, I heard that on documentary.
He had to have misspoken.
Yeah, and then I heard another time when he said it was 78.
Yeah.
So he, that happens. He maybe was talking about the book, but he referred, the first time I heard was 80, and I go like, no,
Nah,
because
no
I
way.
talked to him 77, 78. And then later I heard in another interview he did, he said 78. But anyway, Jim came over to my place. He says, I had Colonel Jesse Marcel, and I knew who he was. He's reached out to us, and he wants to tell his story. And he's going to be calling here in about an hour. And, we're going to interview him. Oh, okay. And my focus was, were there any bodies? Because the suspicion was there were bodies. And I was very interested in what they look like, and some different things that would have clarified my mind that he actually did see these bodies. So that was what I was interested in. So Jesse calls up, and I have to say he was guarded. Maybe it was that he didn't know who he was talking to. I don't know what Jim had told him beforehand, but he was guarded. Maybe he thought he was being recorded, or this was some intelligence thing, and he might be breaking his confidence. But he didn't tell me anything that I didn't already know. Now, a couple of points of clarification.
How did you know any of this at all, though?
It was common knowledge. It was simply
so what did you know?
What we knew is
a craft or two craft or what?
No. So what we knew is that something crashed in Roswell. There was no mention at that time of a physical ship. It was only debris. That's what we knew. That there was debris scattered for a good quarter of a mile on Max Brazel's ranch. We didn't know anything about a recovery of a actual craft. This came up literally years later. That's the stuff that came up in that we learned about in the 80s, that, there was a military team and there were these archaeologists out there and they saw the craft and saw the retrieval. That all came later. What we knew is this debris was spread all over Roswell. Or all over Mac Brazel's.
Well, it kind of makes sense. I mean, first of all, it was reported in the Roswell Daily Record. We all know that. The story was talked about. It was then debunked the next day and all of that. So, I could see that there would be a lot of local buzz about it, even over the years.
People, that's what we knew. Mm-hmm. We did know that Brazel was interrogated later, and held for a couple of days. Again, those are all things that came later. The material that crunched up, and Jesse didn't mention anything about that. He mentioned there were two things that solidified it to him that this debris, because I specifically asked him, did you see a physical craft? And he said no. Now, again, listening to his voice, he was guarded. He may have seen something and wasn't willing to share it, but I don't think he saw it at the scene. He might have seen it at the base later on, but he said no. He didn't see any physical craft. But the two things that solidified that to him, and he's an intelligence officer for the only atomic bomb wing in the country. Yeah. These aren't slackers. These are the best of the best. They could see the silhouette of any airplane and tell you, what it was. The two things he said was the metal, the shards of metal that he found, and the I-beams. Let's talk about the metal first.
Yeah.
He described one sheet was large enough that he could lay it against the wheel well of their vehicle. Now, he told me it was a Jeep. I later heard that this was a staff car, but he specifically said it was a Jeep that they went out to the scene with. And the reason I remember that is because there's a toolbox in the Jeep, and there was a 5-pound sledgehammer in the toolbox. And he placed that piece of metal, and he described it as being no heavier than what people today wouldn't know about it, but than cigarette foil. Back then, when cigarettes had this real kind of mylar-like foil, he said it was no heavier than that. He said you could almost, when you picked up, you almost couldn't even feel it in your hands. It was that light. But he said it was so strong you couldn't. And I'm quoting him. He says he tried to cut it with his penknife, scratch it, couldn't bend it. So he places against the wheel well of the Jeep, took a 5-pound sledgehammer and slammed it several times and could not bend it or put a dent in. And it was clear to him this was not terrestrial material. The other thing were the I-beams. Now, I've read every page of the Mogul reports, both of them. And I've heard the head of Project Mogul was still alive. I don't know if he's still alive now, but he described, we had balsa wood spars and we put decorative tape on those, and that bled through, which is all BS. So, celluloid tape, which is what Scotch tape is made out of. The printing's on the outside. It's lacquer. It's not going to bleed through the cellulite onto a balsa wood spar. And anyway, Jesse described these as metal I-beams, not as balsa wood I-beams. They were metal I-beams with, he called them, they looked like Egyptian hieroglyphs to him. I just refer to them as glyphs. That, he goes like, this is not Chinese. This is, Russian. This is something I've never seen before. And the last thing he described was what has later been suggested as possibly being light fiber optics. He said there was this material that looked like fiber, what we would describe today as light fiber optics. He thought it was bundles of wiring, something like that. Those are the three things that he saw. He said it just covered a quarter of a mile. There was just so much of this stuff. It was just spewed all over the place. And it was in what he described as kind of like a trench, like something had hit it and spewed this material and then, was gone, but no physical craft. I asked him specifically, did you see any bodies? And if you did, can you describe them to me? He said, no, I saw no bodies at all. I came away from the interview and Jim is sitting right there and he can hear what we're saying. And I came away from the interview going like, I knew all this. This was nothing new. This is what we're right where we are. It wasn't
except that you had now a witness. You had an eyewitness, which I mean,
we had someone who from an investigative standpoint says, yeah, I was there. I handled the material, and this is what blows Project Mogul out. He said, no, these weren't balsa wood spars. These were metal spars, metal I-beams, and they had hieroglyphs on them. So it wasn't balsa wood with tape. I would hope that an intelligence officer of the only nuclear bomb wing would know the difference between balsa wood and metal. And he said, now that was the other thing. He said he was so excited and he was embarrassed about this because he took his, just like Lou and Chris and everybody takes their oaths very seriously. He broke rank, went rogue, and he stopped by his house to show his family.
That's right.
That was something that he said kind of sheepishly and kind of embarrassed, because even today, people don't understand. People take their oaths seriously. It's not like what was that Ellsberg, where they're just going to
Daniel Ellsberg, the Pentagon Papers.
Yeah, the Pentagon Papers. Now these guys, because the backstory, that lives can depend on this. We might not see the big picture, because in the intelligence world, everything goes upline, nothing comes back. You go, I got this great information, blah blah blah, and it goes upline. And even if you ask them, well, what happened to that? Was I right? They're not
you don't know, yeah.
They're not going to tell you anything. So
right, he was very sheepish because he did show his wife and his son Jesse, 11-year-old Jesse Jr.
He woke him up, showed his son, showed his wife.
Which that's really good for the rest of us, though, because we had Jesse Jr. talking for many, many years about what he saw. In fact, he did a hypnotic regression himself to try to remember the glyphs that you're just, that we're talking about here.
And he was a very credible. He was a doctor. He's a credible guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely credible man. Yeah.
And that's not to say that someone like Max Brazel, who was a rancher, a farmer, wouldn't be a credible guy. I mean, witnesses are witnesses. I know, like a lot of people have criticized Vallet's book because the witnesses were children at the time. His new book about
Trinity,
yeah, Trinity. Well, they were just kids. What do they know? Our kids are great witnesses.
They are, and those kids grew up to be adults who remembered for their entire lives.
Yeah. You don't forget
what happened.
Yeah. And
I got a question about APRO and Jesse Marcel. So you're getting this story from him directly in 1978, and you're saying, well, that was nothing new. But no, I disagree. You got a witness here, a guy at the base. So I'm thinking, if I'm in APRO at this time, I'm thinking, how are we going to release this information? How are we going to tell this story? Now, the first book on Roswell came out shortly after this. Bill Moore Charles Berlitz, of all people who we have, with Stanton Friedman's help. Stan did not get a credit on there, but so they did it in 1980. So like 2 years after your interview. But was APRO planning to do a scoop on the Roswell story at all? Or?
No, well, this goes into, yes, but the reveal was going to be, because today we talk about disclosure. Okay. There was, as we'll get into in one of these interviews, there were plans to.
Oh, yes. Okay. This is the Carter administration initiative that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
I think we want to do this in a series of these interviews. Like this one, we've gone for over an hour and a half, which is great. But this has gone by. And I'm just trying to think of how we best want to present this, because you do have so much information, Allan. And what I don't want to do is dump this in one 5-hour video.
No.
We don't want to do that to the poor people. So I think we want to break it up.
Because they'll get bored and they'll go off and do their social media thing.
People listening right now will be like, no, keep going. But the thing is, like, to have it as one big 5-hour, and I just don't.
Yeah. Because there's a lot more, and there's a lot more I want to send you too, as far as, visuals and things. But yeah, there was a plan to get this Roswell thing out. And by the time the book, it should have been out before the book ever came out.
Right.
There were big plans for it. And, but as cases go, like I said, the Herman case, and then the Moody case, and Travis Walton, and then Betty Andreessen, they were all, we looked at these things, we go like, oh, this guy doesn't know this woman, and this woman doesn't know this thing, but they're all telling the same story. So like an investigator, you want to bring in witnesses that don't know one another. You interview everyone, you take them in separate rooms. Okay, tell me your story. And then you go interview the other guy. You want to see what elements they all agree on. And we like I said, we left out things so that we could go back and look at it and go like, okay, nobody knew this, but this
I have a guest who will not leave me alone.
I'm going to have to send you some pictures of my daughter's
This is Yates.
Yeah.
Yates F. Dolan. She's a good girl. She's been, and she's just going to walk around at the table here.
My cat was, we called him Bob Wire. I got him at a swap meet. There was a girl in an army jacket, and I saw this thing pop its head up out of her coat. It was a little run of the litter, and it only had one eye. It looked like it only had one eye. And she said, oh, run the litter, it'll probably die. I go, no, let me, I want it. Let me take it home. And this thing was no bigger than your thumb. And I actually put human antibiotics in its bad eye to see, because I figured it looked like an infection, which is common in birthing. And its eye got better, and I would mix up cream with tuna fish, and literally almost spoon-fed it, and grew up. And I had him for 11 years, and then he went rogue over to the neighbors, because I always fed him dry cat food because I couldn't stand the smell of wet cat food. So I always kept on the dry cat food. Well, the neighbors started feeding him wet cat food, and he ditched me in a heartbeat.
That's you think they're domesticated, but there's always that wild animal that lurks inside.
He was very interesting, because he would run out to meet me when I drove home. Now, how he knew my car, he would literally run out to the middle of the street and just dance, and was all excited. I like swerve the car not to hit him.
Hey, well, so my cat is being very good right now. So I want to ask you one more thing before we wrap this segment up, which is the Betty Andreessen material. I have some of her images and some of your drawings as well. And can I show these, and you can talk about them?
Sure.
And you, this is some of your last stuff that you did with APRO before you left, I believe. You worked on.
Yeah, it actually, I say,
case.
Formally it was 1980, but technically speaking, I was still in communication, because I'd moved to California. I was still in communication until 1982 with Jim. But again, there's no internet, there's no nothing, and then I had reasons that I wanted to kind of,
Do you see what I have on the screen here?
Yes, I do.
So this is one page of Betty's letter.
And that's,
I have the whole thing here.
Betty's illustration there.
Yeah.
Now, there's something interesting, because today a lot of people describe these what we'll call grays, although there's my belief is they're not as gray as like, like a battleship gray. They're more like pale, like a vampire kind of pale gray
okay.
I think. But she described something that, again, Moody described it, Herman described it, and Betty Hill described it, that they had actual irises, that wasn't solid black, that they had an iris. Now, it's very possible.
Is this a feature that you were not going to tell us earlier?
No, there's
something else.
I can share. I'll share it with you. I hope I'm not ruining any cases going forward. But all of them describe their skin as looking and feeling like marshmallows.
Interesting.
And the reason I say that was so key is part of it was a little concerning because what else feels like marshmallows? Foam latex feels like marshmallows, and it looks like marshmallows. If it's not cured correctly, you can have those little wrinkles like you see in marshmallows. And I'm going
latex, so like a suit, like a
foam latex. Because like
a costume.
Doty, I was pronouncing his name wrong. So, we did fake, abductions and stuff, which I don't believe. But that was a little concern of me. I don't believe now that there could be something that they place over their skin, some kind of protective garment, to prevent bacterial or viral infection. But they all described it as looking and feeling. Now, if you look at a marshmallow, you can see it has kind of a dusty appearance, and you can see it has particular, like, it can have like imperfections, like creases and stuff. And they all describe this because I drilled down on it, because this is a detail that all of them shared, from Betty Andreessen, Betty Hill, not Travis didn't say it, but Moody and Herman all said it. They said, and that they didn't say it looked like sponge rubber or it looked like sponge. They said it looked like marshmallows.
Wow. Okay.
And so
thanks for sharing that. I mean, it's look, you know what? We're almost half a century later here.
Yeah. We kept that back because if we found another abductee or eyewitness, we want to be able to go, well, what did their skin look like? Oh, it looked like, leather, or it had scales, or it felt like upholstery. We go, well, that doesn't match these other 4 eyewitnesses, so.
Here's 2 other images. You drew these.
Yes, those I drew.
Well, the one, not the bottom side.
The bottom side view, no.
That's Betty.
I didn't draw that. We had plans to sculpt this. This was one of the things I was going to be sculpting. She actually did later on. She did a bunch of little. She's somewhat.
And these were based on Betty's observation.
Yes,
these drawings.
Yes.
So this is kind of what she saw. Now the one on the right in particular, it's got a lot of detail. It looks really well done, honestly. I have to say.
Thank you.
There's cheekbones in there. There's a lip. There's a lower lip.
I had a hypothesis that, again, we were back in a time when we were still trying to prove this was happening. Today, I don't think there's anyone who would seriously say, oh, no, UFOs don't exist at all. There's some subplot there, but there are engineering principles about biology. You've shared a couple times, well, why would they look human? They evolved on another planet. Well, they're engineering principles which have to conform to so you can build things.
No, it's a good design.
So
bipedal, get
like the cheekbones. If they have that large of an eye, and they're like, and that eye is receiving light, it's not like a prismatic eye like a mantis or an insect. If it's an eye that focuses light, it has to be an orb. It has to be round to focus the eye on the light on the back of the eye of the retina. So that requires a zygomatic arch underneath the eye to support the eye, and we can calculate how big that eyeball would be without having it out. So those were things that I was looking at. Okay, does this make sense? Could this really be a real thing, a real biological entity with an eye like that? So I include that in my drawings, trying to make them as anatomically correct. It's just like people do. I was interested in paleontology as a kid, as every kid is. And is exactly what they do in paleontology. Is exactly what they do in primate. Now, I do have some education in physical anthropology, and you know, like people say, "Oh, how much do we know about dinosaurs? How much do we know about early humans?" So little, so little. When we talk about Homo erectus, how many Homo erectus skeletons do we have? We have one. We have one. Tunga Tara.
And a bunch of fragments.
Yeah, we Homo sapiens, us, we have the fragments of 20 individuals. 20 individuals out of.
I'm going back through early prehistory.
Going back 300 million years, we have the fragments of 20 individuals. We have more partial skeletons of Neanderthal than we do Homo sapiens, and even less Homo erectus. So what people do, they get someone like myself, who has some knowledge of anatomy and physiology, and we try and reconstruct. Okay, does this make sense from physical? Like there's well,
they look for different things. If you have a femur, you can sew one thing. If you have a part of a skull and you can see where the big hole is, that's another important thing.
Well,
there's all of the pelvis. They all have their own.
You can get into even more by looking at what it says here. Like there's a controversy right now about Tyrannosaurus Rex. Did it have lips or did it not have lips? Like crocodiles and alligators don't have lips, but if it didn't have lips, its teeth would dry out, and we wouldn't have all the Tyrannosaurus teeth that we have today, because crocodiles and alligators, their teeth don't dry out because they're in the water all the time. So we know.
So to bring this back, then, I mean, you're talking about a lot of intelligent inferences that have to be made based on the evidence that is available, and you're kind of doing the same thing with these drawings.
Yeah, that was the thrust. There was the plan was inevitably to catalog this, not as a commercial book, but just like a paper, basically.
Yeah.
This is what we've learned, and this is why we think this really is. Just like if you found a new dinosaur skeleton, you go like, okay, let's look at this. Let's see how this works. How did this thing look when it lived, and what did it likely eat? And so that's what we were trying to do. But that was at a time when I'm way beyond that now. It's not like are we being visited by aliens from another star system? It's like, yeah, we are. Now are we going to reveal this? Are we going to open this? Are we going to bring this 900 gorilla in the room to public, to the general public?
That's
And
a big question.
I and you've shared this, and I wish this was the case. People go like, oh, we want the aliens because they're going to turn the deserts to gardens, and they're going to teach us to love one another and no more nuclear war. And honestly, Richard, they wouldn't want to get involved. Would you want to get involved? Do you want to settle the Middle East crisis? Do you want to settle the border between India and China? I mean, what if they came down and said, no, the Chinese are right. That's their land, and we're going to enforce that. Who would be happy with that?
We are one messy civilization. That's the truth.
It's just how things.
Who wants to solve our problems?
Yeah, it's just how things evolve. It's how things come up. We argue about it, and then somebody wins, and that's where we take off. Some alien civilization comes down here. They're not going to get involved. They're not going to solve our problems. And if they did, we'd all hate them. We all say, "Oh no, we want to learn from them. To give us free energy, cure our diseases." Okay.
Do you think, what do you think about the hybridization argument or infiltration or anything like that? What do you think? Do you think that there is one alien faction that is actually getting really in our business and infiltrating or seeking to control society in one way or another?
I don't believe there. This is how I see it.
Dave Jacobs calls it planetary takeover.
Yeah, I love Jacobs. In 100 years, I could say, yeah, you were right. We're all living under their yoke now. But I see it as this. Let's say you're an alien civilization. You've come here to harvest genetic material. Now, we did in 1947 during the Roswell. We didn't even know we didn't even have the DNA until 1944. We first isolated bacterial DNA from the pneumococcal bacteria. Mm-hmm. DNA exists. It wasn't until 52 when we actually mapped it, because this is the helix, and we didn't even use it until 80s. I mean, the first case it was ever used in was in 78 in England. There was a UK crime case that was solved using DNA, but we didn't map the genome until the 90s, I think it was. And we're learning a lot. We're really getting a lot of it. The mRNA technology, which I won't get into the controversy about that, but it's excellent for cancer therapy. I mean, if you want to cure cancer, that's the way to go. But we're novice in it. So let's say they come down here, they go, oh my God, look at all this DNA, look at all this RNA. Boy, we need that. We can use this. This is like the best biological computer your money can buy. Guys, they go to our people, guys, we want to make a deal. Can we do some experiments, get some of this stuff, and it's just for peaceful purposes. We're not your enemies or anything. We're explorers, we're scientists. We want to learn about you and get this DNA. It's all medical stuff. And they go, yeah, go knock yourselves out. Just don't kill anybody. We don't want you. We don't want dead bodies showing up. And stuff. Do whatever you need to do. So they go on this hybrid program now. I don't think, and from a genetic standpoint, that they're breeding these with their own genetics. I think they're going in and just attacking the genome, turning switches on and off to create the things we want. Because we do that. We know that. The Chinese are doing it right now with their military. The Chinese are experimenting genetically with their soldiers how to make a better soldier. It's a Captain America type experimenting. Now, I know we say we don't do it, but if I found a program tomorrow that said we did, wouldn't surprise me. We do things. I mean, we know. I don't want to get into what some forces do, but I can tell you right now, you can't carry a 60-pound backpack for 2 days without sleep unless you're on something.
Right? Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You're using. We did it in World War II. We used amphetamines. The Germans used basically methamphetamine, but we used amphetamines. The UK was giving people the red pill so they could stay up and stuff. So would we go in and genetically engineer somebody to have a larger breathing capacity and stronger
super
muscles?
soldiers?
Yeah, exactly. So I think what they're doing is they take these genetics. Hey, we're going to build a better human being. It's easy to gestate them, preferably in a human subject, and then once it's viable, just like we would go to test tube. What are they going to use these things for? To take over the world? No, I don't think so. I think if there are any here on this planet, it's to get them up to speed. Okay, these are your people. Learn about them, study them.
Okay.
Get the best of them. It's just like a
intelligence gathering.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not just intelligence. It's like an exchange student. Learn their ways. They're good people. They want to be. They aspire to being better. Take the best of them, and then we're going to send you to this colony on the third star of some remote solar system as our ambassador, or you're going to be a teacher in our university on Alpha Reticuli, or whatever. But I think they're as a commodity, and they could be using it for other things too. They could be using it as a food source. The hybriding, food sources for themselves on the planet. I mean, we have very high protein rich food sources here, and if these guys, they don't look like the strongest, fittest things in the universe. I go, man, look at if we had this protein source, if we could be more like them, we'd be much more viable. We could, because there's nothing like humans. We talk, we're destroying the planet. We have human beings living in the Arctic and in the Amazon rainforest, hardy, with nothing. They just surviving on their wits. If we can't live in an environment, we'll create an environment to live in.
Yeah.
How valuable would that be across a million galaxies or a million star systems? You take these guys as pioneers, you hybrid them, go colonize that planet. Oh man, it'd be excellent. And is there any value to that? Of course there is.
I want to
And
return to this with you. I want to go into some more detail on this.
sure.
Can we? I've got a cat that's demanding that I feed her right now. That's why she's going back and
Sure.
forth here.
Yeah.
I would think I'd like to want to continue this, and I want
Sure.
to talk about your two sightings. I want to talk about the exhibit that you were involved in planning as a result of the Carter administration initiative. And I would definitely want to return to this conversation, just talking about these ETs as you understand it.
This particular ET is like,
Yeah,
I want to really caveat that, because I'm not dissing anyone, because I hear this all the time. Oh, if somebody says they know what they're doing, then they don't know anything.
yeah.
I may know a lot about how people live in the culture of Tucson, Arizona, because I live there. I know that. I've studied that. I've been a part of that. It doesn't mean that I know how people live in mainland China. There are thousands of UFO experiences and sightings and aliens. And
I think we have a fairly significant galactic neighborhood.
Yeah, really, what's more likely, that the universe is totally empty, or it's like Grand Central Station?
Mm-hmm.
We have this very myopic look that, we're still using rockets and steam engines and stuff like. That might be. Water might not even exist on that planet. They might not have a fuel. They might not have petroleum. Maybe the gravity propulsion was the first thing they stumbled on. It doesn't mean maybe they don't even use electricity. Who knows? We don't know. And like I said, we don't even know if they built these ships themselves. They could have bought them. They could have traded them. They could have found them. They could have shot.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm guilty of this. I think of the natural progression of technology that we humans went through to get to where we are. And my instinct is to think, yeah, other species have done the same. But you're making a good point. They may not have gone through all the steps that we went through.
Yeah, just look at electricity. The first American inventor of an electric motor, he was an uneducated, couldn't even read, write. His wife, who was a school teacher, I forget his name now, she had to write down the notes. He was experimenting with electric motors. And when he patented his first electric motor, came out in the local newspaper, it wasn't used for 60 years. Nobody found a use for this electric motor for 60 years. Another thing that brings my honest thing is that the people don't realize is the fax machine. When do you think the fax machine was invented?
Well, I want to say the 1950s, but I don't think it was
the 1800s. The first fax machine, the first fax was transmitted from London to Paris in the late 1800s. You can look it up. I'll send you a link. The machine didn't look anything like we see it as now. It was a big pendulum-looking thing, but the investors said, "Why would we need to do something so fast?" I'll tell you. It's very well done.
Amazing.
Just you can even look. I'm sure that's even on Wikipedia. The first fax machine.
All right. So anyone watching now, you all know why I really wanted to interview Allan Lavigne. This is exactly why, because you know about the UFO stuff, but there's all of these other fascinating tidbits that come out. I love it. I love it.
It all comes together. You really. Again, like I said, you can't be myopic. You can't always think of it like from us. Well, we're so bad, we're so evil. We got to stop nuclear war. Blah, blah. Well, these guys might have already been through their nuclear war phase. They're going like, oh yeah, that stuff. I guarantee you, if you have field propulsion, you don't care about nuclear war. I mean, that's force field technology. There's nothing we could do with our nuclear weapons that's going to freak them out. And really, are we a threat to the galactic? We are not even back to the moon yet. How long did it take us to get the Orion off the launch pad? And they're afraid of us? Come on. Well,
I don't know. I guess you're right. I sometimes think that we could be a disruption. We could be a problem. But I'm only guessing here.
The thing I shared with you initially, and I don't know if you had even had time to look at, I sent you two pictures of what I refer to as a lost tribe in the Amazon rainforest. And these poor people, they've never had contact with modern society at all. They don't even know it exists. They don't have use of metal tools. They've been studied literally for decades by satellite. They measure where they move their tribes, how many people get born, what water sources they use, all by satellite, the anthropologists. And they're looking at them, and finally one day they decide, we want to get a closer look, but it looks dangerous. These guys, they got arrows and stuff, and we don't want to disrupt them. So we're going to send a drone in, take a look at them. So they send a drone in, and I sent you 2 pictures. These poor people, they're freaked out. They're looking at one guy's got a bow and arrow, is going to shoot this thing down. Imagine what they're thinking. They don't even have metal tools, and this little flying thing is hovering above them. What the hell are they thinking? Yeah. They couldn't even imagine that for decades they've been being studied by an advanced civilization from outer space, from satellites miles above the Earth. They have no clue. They have no idea. They don't even know that exists. For all they know, the Earth is flat. And so we have no ill intent for them. We're not going to go down there and solve their problems. Here is a water purifier. Here are flip-flops so you don't get thorns in your feet. And we want to register you to vote. We're not going to do that. We learned about proselytizing. The Spanish learned that. Everybody learned, oh, that's a bad idea. We meant well. We didn't want to keep ripping people's hearts out. So we look at our religion a little bit differently, but we're not going to do that because we learned. Now, you think these people haven't learned? Are they going to get involved in the Medellin cartel and go like, hey, those are bad guys. We're going to stop them from selling these evil drugs. They're not going to get involved in that. They're going like, look, these are your problems. We're not getting involved in your petty squabbles. We're here to trade, and you want to blow yourselves up? There's a million other planets out there. Okay, you do your best. You've come this far. We think you're going to learn, but we're going to hedge our bets. We're going to preserve as much as we can. We're studying your history. We're recording that. We're going to learn all we can. We're going to learn from your mistakes, but you're on your own. We're not going to solve your problems because you wouldn't like us if we did. John Burroughs said a couple of weekends ago, I was listening to it. So he says, yeah, clean up on aisle 13. Are you going to be happy with that? You're going to be happy with what has to do, because just like you share, we look at all this control that we're seeing from governments and stuff and the global elites. We're not happy with that. Imagine if it was an alien doing that. They came down and said, look, you guys got to get your act together. Maybe not now.
I often do wonder this, but
yeah, I know. But it's you only have to look at man's history to see where this is coming from.
Someone's doing something that the rest of us aren't going to like. Hey, so look, let's cut this here.
Yeah.
And we're going to pick up with further dives into other elements of this. Right. I think this is a good point to break it off. So I want to just, by the way, you don't like even have an act. You don't have to do a website. You're not all about the publicity, are you? Or
no,
I don't think so.
No, I mean, I don't. This is. The reason when we talked, you said, oh, if you want to do it just audio, you can do that too. No, right. I want people to look in my eyes. I want people to do what I did and to see interviews. I'm not hiding from anybody,
right?
But I'm not a victim. I'm not traumatized. I'm not looking to make any money off this. I mean, I haven't told more than maybe, I don't think more than 3 or 4 people my first sighting. I've only told you about my second sighting. Nobody else. I've never shared that with anybody.
Oh yeah, we're going to get into that because that is an amazing story.
I didn't hide it because I was ashamed. I didn't want it. When you reveal something like this at the time, I go like, I didn't think, what is my wife going to think about me? Because I knew my wife loved me and she wouldn't have thought anything differently about it. But what were people going to think about? Oh, she's married to that crazy UFO guy.
Mm-hmm.
Especially he sees things, and I didn't want.
It's bad now, but in the 70s, even worse.
People's lives are ruined. Herman's life was ruined. Travis, he's doing okay now, but back then he'll tell you point blank.
Mm-hmm.
He was.
It was rough for him. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it was, and Moody. Who knows what happened to Moody? We don't even know. He's been disappeared.
And we're going to talk all about that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I didn't want it. Like I said, it's not about publicity. It's not about anything. like that. I do get irritated when I hear what I know as, oh, this is entertainment. You know, a lot of these podcasts that come out, there's, oh, maybe it's, you know, angels are doing. Like, oh, God, why would an angel need a spaceship? You know, why, you know, if it's actually a metaphysical being, they're just going to pop right into your living room. They're not going to need a spaceship. They're not going to do medical experiments on you, take skin samples. I don't think angels or demons need skin samples. You know, and I'm not making fun of people that believe this, because I'm a Christian. This has never shaken my faith. If there are other alien civilizations, okay. There was a time when we didn't know about, you know, China or India. You know, Christianity didn't fall apart when we learned more about these cultures and other religions. Doesn't bother me today.
Very good point.
Yeah. So that's right. But I just, like I said, I don't want anybody to think that, oh, you know, poor baby him and he's traumatized. No, it's not. It was a good experience altogether. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about life, and I look at the world in a very different way, much more like you do. This is information that, like it or not, you got to pull the bandage off at sometimes.
I'm glad you're doing that here. Yeah. So we're going to end this here. This is the final time, and we're done. Yeah. We're going to do the next segment. So I want to thank you, my guest, Allan Lavigne. This has been, how do they say in HR? Exceeds expectations or whatever. Right. This exceeded mine. So I was really glad we got to do this. And we're going to come back for follow up on this, because there's much more to discuss. But for right now, we're going to end this. I want to thank all the listeners for being here with us. I'm hoping you enjoyed this as much as I personally enjoyed this, hearing Allan tell these fascinating stories about APRO. But for now, we're going to end it, and I'll catch you all again the next time, and I will have Allan back. And thank everyone for being here. If you like this, please like the video, help with the algorithms, please. You know how it is. Subscribe to the channel, and do check out what I do over at richardolanmembers.com. Most of the work that I do is there. Some of it is here on YouTube, but most of what I do is over at Richard Dolan Members. There is a paywall, but hey, you know, I got to pay the bills somehow. But there's also a lot of free content there as well, so you can go see if you like it. And that's it. I want to thank everyone for being here, and again, thank my guest, Allan Lavigne. That's it for now. Let's all keep fighting the good fight. Later.